Hey guys, welcome to Chinese History Stories. Tonight, we are about to step into a mystery that's been whispering through the scrolls of Chinese history for thousands of years. Not a war, not a love story, but something older than all of that, a book. Not just any book, though. One that supposedly holds the code of the universe, a guide to time, fate, and decision. But what if I told you half of it is missing? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Then, hop into the comments and tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Long before there were emperors, palaces, or even writing systems, ancient Chinese thinkers were already peeking at the rhythm of the universe. They weren't just staring at stars or clouds, they were studying change itself, birth and death, light and dark, movement and stillness. Somehow, they believed all these could be translated into a set of symbols. Straight lines, broken lines, 6 lines stacked into a hexagram. Simple shapes, maybe, but packed with meaning. This is what we now call the I Ching, or Book of Changes. But here's the kicker. What we read today, and what's been studied for thousands of years, might only be half the story. Modern readers treat the 64 hexagrams as a complete set, neat, symmetrical, mysterious enough to feel ancient, yet logical enough to be called a system. But scratch beneath that surface, and some unsettling questions emerge. For example, why do many ancient records hint at another half? Why did certain scholars treat some hexagrams as dangerous or forbidden? And why did entire dynasties tuck portions of this book away, sealed in gold or buried with the dead? Let's rewind a bit. The earliest version of the 8 trigrams, think of them like the DNA of the I Ching, are said to come from Fuxi, a mythical ruler from pre-dynastic China. He didn't just doodle these trigrams during tea time. Legend says he saw a dragon horse emerge from the Yellow River, its back carved with a pattern of dots and lines. This wasn't just art, it was a message. And boom, just like that, Fuxi laid the foundation of the universe in 8 simple diagrams. But here's the first crack in the mirror. The trigrams Fuxi allegedly created don't match the arrangement used in the I Ching we know today. It's like finding blueprints for a house, but the windows are where the doors should be, and the whole second floor is gone. Historians and mystics argue about this endlessly. Some say the Fuxi trigrams represent a pre-heaven order pure, untouched, the way the world was meant to be. Others claim the current version is the post-heaven order, tainted, chaotic, a remix after things went wrong. And then there's the bigger question. Why would anyone hide half the knowledge? Well, here's one theory, and it's a little chilling. What if the lost or hidden half of the I Ching doesn't just describe the world as it is, but shows how to manipulate it? Not just predict outcomes, but influence them. Imagine you had a map, not of where to walk, but how to rewrite the path beneath your feet. That's not a guidebook. That's power. Dangerous power. Some stories say ancient emperors feared this, that revealing too much of the I Ching could unravel order itself, that if common people understood the full scope, chaos would follow. So, a decision was made. Give them the safe half, the poetic half, the half that teaches patience, balance, acceptance, and bury the other half, so deep only whispers remain. But of course, whispers have a way of growing louder. As we drift deeper into the story, we will find traces of this missing knowledge scattered through history. A line edited here, a diagram banned there, A tomb that holds a scroll that doesn't match the public version. The pattern is like a hidden melody, always playing behind the obvious tune. Tonight, we're just stepping into the prologue, just brushing the surface of something that's been haunting scholars, emperors, and mystics for centuries. And trust me, things are going to get much weirder from here. So settle in. There's a long night ahead. Let's go back, way, way back, before scrolls, before Confucius, even before the word China meant anything. We're talking about a time when stories weren't written, they were carved into bone, painted on cave walls, or murmured around fires. And right in the middle of this misty prehistoric scene, there's a figure that stands out, Fuxi. Now, if you've never heard of Fuxi, don't worry, he's a bit like the Chinese version of Prometheus mixed with Da Vinci, a culture hero. One of those mythical founding figures who supposedly invented half the things people relied on to survive, like fishing nets, marriage rituals, and, oh yeah, the foundation of cosmic understanding. No big deal. The legend goes that one day, as Fuxi was chilling by the Yellow River, a strange creature emerged from the waters. Not quite a dragon, not quite a horse. This was a longma, or dragon horse, and on its back was a pattern, not a picture, not a message in words. Just a mysterious sequence of dots and lines, etched like nature's QR code. Fuxi saw it and understood. No one really knows how, but in that moment, he supposedly grasped the rhythm of reality. He boiled the pattern down into 8 trigrams, which he arranged in a perfect circle. Each trigram was made of 3 lines, either solid or broken, representing heaven, earth, water, fire, thunder, wind, mountain, and lake. These weren't just symbols. They were metaphors for everything, from the movement of stars to the emotions in a human heart. This arrangement became known as the earlier Heaven Bagua, or Xiantian Bagua. It's considered pure, cosmic, the state of balance before the world got messy. Think of it like the universe's baby photo, but here's where things start to get suspicious. Because the version of the trigrams that people actually used in practice, the one embedded in the I Ching, is completely different. It's called a later Heaven Bagua, or Hutian Bagua. The trigrams are scrambled, rearranged, turned into a square. It's messier, earthier, reflective of human experience, not divine order. So, why the switch? One theory is that the original arrangement was never meant for everyday use. It was too perfect, too raw, like trying to drink sunlight. The later Heaven Bagua, on the other hand, was designed to cope with the mess of life, wars, love, betrayal, taxes, a user-friendly remix of cosmic truth. But there's a darker theory. Some believe that the earlier Heaven Bagua wasn't just a model, it was a tool, a blueprint not for understanding fate, but for altering it. In the wrong hands, it could twist the natural order. So ancient sages did what every wise protagonist in a fantasy story does. They hid it or diluted it, or disguised it under poetic metaphors and layers of interpretation. That way, it couldn't be weaponized. And yet, hints of it keep popping up. Taoist texts from later dynasties whisper about hidden patterns and forbidden arrangements. Some temples even guarded stone diagrams that differ subtly but eerily from the mainstream versions. They weren't mistakes, they were leftovers, glitches, proof that someone, somewhere, remembered the original. There's even a rumor, unverified, of course, that the Forbidden City in Beijing contains a sealed chamber never opened in public tours, where a giant earlier heaven diagram is carved into the floor. They say only the emperor and a handful of court diviners ever entered. No photos, no replicas, just silence. Fuxi may have gifted humanity the first version of order, but what followed was chaos wrapped in careful edits. Because once people got a taste of decoding the world, they didn't stop at observation. They wanted control. And with that control came secrets. You see, the I Ching wasn't just evolving, it was splitting. One path for the public, filled with metaphor and advice. Another path, quiet and cold, running underground like a hidden current. So next time you see a simple trigram, just 3 little lines, remember, it may not be as simple as it looks. Those lines have roots deeper than most books, deeper than most memories. And if you flip them the wrong way, well, you might see something you weren't supposed to. And yet, someone did flip them. And he was locked in a tower for it. The man in the tower wasn't a myth. He wasn't a god or a spirit. He was a real flesh and blood person. A king, actually. His name? King Wen of Zhou. And in a twist that feels like something out of a prison novel, he laid the groundwork for one of the most mysterious systems in history from behind bars. Let's rewind for context. It's the late Qing Dynasty. The ruling king, Vanishing, is a paranoid tyrant with a fondness for cruelty and wine. And King Wen, well, he's technically not a king, yet just a nobleman with big ideas and an even bigger following. Naturally, that makes the ruling house nervous. So, what do? Lock him up. But here's where the story gets strange. Because instead of spiraling into despair or plotting revenge, King Wen sits in his cell and starts calculating. Now, legend says he didn't just twiddle his thumbs. With nothing but time and maybe a few turtle shells and yarrow stalks, he began to organize the universe. Literally. Using the 8 trigrams as a base, he expanded them into 64 hexagrams, 6-line structures formed by stacking 2 trigrams on top of each other. Each hexagram was a kind of cosmic snapshot, a situation, a state of change, a moment in the dance of life. But King Wen didn't just arrange them randomly. He placed them in a specific sequence, now known as the King Wen sequence, and wrote brief judgments for each one. Here's where the rabbit hole opens. Because the sequence itself doesn't follow a simple pattern. It isn't linear. It isn't symmetrical. Some hexagrams seem paired with their opposites, while others bounce unpredictably from theme to theme. Harmony is followed by collapse. Peace turns to war, then swings back to peace again. Some scholars say it mirrors the real world's randomness. Others think there's a deeper code hidden in the order. But whatever it is, it's only half. You see, King Wen's sequence only builds one side of the I Ching structure. It's elegant, sure, deep, definitely, but there are signs subtle and eerie that he withheld something. Some believe he encoded a second sequence, or at least left clues for it, scattered like breadcrumbs across the hexagrams. And that missing half, yeah, that's what people have been chasing for centuries. Let's pause here and think about the setting. A lonely prisoner confined in silence, conjuring a map of reality. There's something poetic and a little tragic about it. Because what King Wen did wasn't just smart, it was suspiciously smart. Too sophisticated for a man with no books, no tools, no assistance. Which leads to 2 possibilities. 1, he really was a genius touched by the divine. Or 2, he had access to something older, something buried. Some Taoist traditions whisper that King Wen found a portion of the earlier heaven sequence during his early years, maybe a broken diagram, maybe a stone carving from a forgotten temple. Whatever it was, he saw it, and it haunted him. And when he was finally locked away, with no distractions, he didn't invent the hexagrams. He reconstructed them. But here's the kicker, only the safe ones. He crafted a public version of the I Ching, one that could guide people without overwhelming them. A version that hinted at change without showing how to bend it. He kept the deeper half for himself, or buried it in metaphors so thick, only someone with his knowledge could decode them. And he wasn't the last to do this, because decades later, someone else picked up where King Wen left off. He read the hexagrams so obsessively, his students feared for his sanity. He was so moved by what he found, he reportedly wept 3 times. And in a strange twist of fate, he may have deleted what King Wen had tried to hide. Picture this. An old man with tired eyes, white robes, dusted with travel, hunched over ancient scrolls by candlelight. His fingers trace the lines again and again, solid, broken, solid, until they blur. He's not looking for answers anymore. He's trying to make peace with the questions. That man is Confucius. Most people remember Confucius as the ultimate rule maker, the wise sage who gave the world 1,000 aphorisms about virtue, family, and order. But a few know that in the final years of his life, he became obsessed with something that didn't quite fit his philosophy. The I Ching, it wasn't just a curiosity, it became a fixation. According to historical records, Confucius read the Book of Changes so often that he claimed, "If I had another 50 years to live, I would devote them all to studying the I Ching." Let that sink in. This wasn't a casual read, it was a full-on spiral. He even admitted that he wore out the leather bindings of his copy 3 times from flipping through it so much. But what was he really looking for? That's where things get fuzzy. Because while Confucius wrote extensive commentaries on the I Ching, what we now call the 10 Wings, he also made edits, subtle ones. And the changes he made raise eyebrows. For starters, some of the hexagram meanings were softened, their sharper edges dulled down. Where King Wen's judgments could be cryptic or blunt, Confucius's interpretations leaned toward moral lessons. Almost like he wanted to domesticate the text, make it ethical, predictable, safe for society. Now, that in itself might not sound suspicious. After all, Confucianism is all about structure and harmony. But when you compare earlier fragments of the I Ching to what we have now, you start to notice something's missing. Certain lines referenced paths not to be walked, doors that should stay closed, gates of reversal, gone. Entire hexagrams, once rumored to represent taboo states like overthrowing authority or escaping destiny, were reworded or quietly dropped from commentary. It's like someone came in with a soft eraser and scrubbed away the parts that made the ruling class uncomfortable. Some scholars believe Confucius wasn't just editing for clarity, he was burying something. Maybe he saw what King Wen saw. Maybe he realized that the I Ching wasn't just a book of philosophy. It was a mirror that could reflect too much. And once you looked too deeply, you couldn't look away. One legend, whispered in late-night tea shops and Taoist circles, claims that Confucius had a vision. After weeks of no sleep and non-stop divination work, he dreamed of a version of the I Ching with 128 hexagrams, not 64, double, a dual mirror, reflecting not just his world, but its shadow. When he woke, he wrote feverishly, then stopped, and burned it. According to this version of the story, Confucius believed the world wasn't ready, that humanity needed the guidance, not the full power. And so he made a choice. Give them just enough, wrap the mystery in wisdom, and hide the rest in riddles only the most devoted would even notice. But here's where it gets even stranger. Because right after Confucius's death, the I Ching's reputation started to change. It stopped being a book of hidden codes and started becoming a tool for scholars and kings, a safe, state-approved classic. By the time of the Han Dynasty, it had been canonized, respectable, clean. And the missing parts? Nobody even asked about them anymore. But the universe doesn't forget. Symbols don't die. They just change addresses. And the more Confucius tried to smooth over the I Ching's deeper layers, the more cracks began to show in other places. Secret societies, peasant uprisings, quiet mystics in the mountains who somehow knew about the other side, as if the truth was never really gone, just misplaced. And deep in the corridors of power, someone was starting to get nervous, because when the emperor himself had a dream about a black hexagram that didn't exist, he ordered the vaults sealed, and the golden boxes never opened again. The boxes weren't just golden, they were inscribed, locked, and hidden beneath layers of stone, buried so deep within the Han imperial archives that most people forgot they existed. And that was the point. Because the Han Dynasty didn't just love the I Ching, they feared it. You see, by the time Emperor Wu of Han took the throne, the I Ching had become more than a classic. It was a political tool, a divine consultant, and, quietly, a liability. Emperor Wu was deeply superstitious. He relied heavily on divination, omens, and court astrologers. But one night, after a particularly troubling series of dreams, he summoned a group of hermits, mystics, and former officials men who had all, in one way or another, gone a little too deep into the ancient texts. They brought him something he never expected, a set of scrolls unlike anything in the official archives. No names, no commentary, just lines unfamiliar hexagrams that didn't appear in the I Ching everyone knew. Some even broke the format completely. 5 lines instead of 6, layered spirals, inverted trigrams. One scroll had no lines at all, only ink blots shaped like storms, with strange symbols hovering above them. Another had diagrams that resembled constellations, except they didn't match any stars in the sky. The mystics called it the buried branch. According to them, this was the other side, the half that had been excised, erased, or simply never written down. Not because it lacked value, but because it revealed too much. They whispered that these scrolls contained the unfiltered current of the universe, that interpreting them didn't just predict the future, it rewired your relationship to it. One scroll, they said, had driven a reader to disappear into the mountains, never to return. Another burned itself in the fire the moment the emperor's fingers touched it. Naturally, Emperor Wu was both terrified and intrigued. But he wasn't reckless. He did what emperors do best. He secured control. He ordered the scrolls locked in a sealed chamber under the imperial palace, each one placed in a box made of gold and jade. Only 5 officials were given access, and even they were sworn under threat of death, never to speak of what they read. A full registry was written, then promptly destroyed. All mentions of these scrolls were scrubbed from court records. From that point on, the I Ching was declared complete. The official version was standardized. Anything else was branded superstition or heresy. It wasn't just about protecting power. It was about protecting people from knowledge they couldn't control. And here's the thing, this wasn't paranoia. Not entirely. Because in the years following the sealing of the scrolls, several strange events were recorded, not in court annals, but in side notes, personal letters, and recovered tablets. Officials assigned to guard the sealed room reported nightmares, recurring visions of spinning symbols, and voices that spoke in mirrored phrases. One man allegedly tried to recreate a pattern from memory and ended up blind. Then came the incident of the Southern scholar. A minor official in the Han bureaucracy, he stumbled upon a forgotten diagram in a provincial temple. At first, he thought it was a variation of Hexagram 49 revolution, but something was off. The lines were reversed, curved like waves instead of stacked. He copied it, studied it, meditated on it. 2 weeks later, he predicted the assassination of a noble 5 days before it happened. Then he predicted a landslide. Then a rebellion. By the time the imperial court got word, he'd already vanished. And the scroll he left behind burned itself again. Coincidence? Maybe. But the pattern was becoming clear. There was another side to the I Ching, a more volatile, more direct version. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't philosophical, it was raw, mechanical, like staring into the gears of the universe without any filter. That's when Emperor Wu gave the order that changed everything. All remnants of the buried hexagrams are to be sealed forever. The heavens must remain partially veiled. The veil is mercy. And just like that, the trail went dark. For now. Because as history has shown, nothing stays buried forever. And centuries later, another emperor would have a dream. But this time, it wasn't the symbols or storms. It was a door. And someone was standing on the other side, knocking softly. It started, as many strange imperial events do, with a dream. Tang Emperor Xuanzong had ruled through music, poetry, and opulence. His court was filled with scholars, dancers, alchemists, and philosophers. The dynasty was at its cultural peak. But amidst all the splendor, the emperor began to have recurring visions, dreams that left him shaken, even silent. In one dream, he stood before a massive wooden door, set in a blank white wall. No hinges, no keyhole. Only a series of moving lines etched across the surface, straight, broken, reassembling, twisting like breathing skin. Every night, the dream returned. And each time, a figure stood behind the door, invisible, but knocking, just once, just soft enough to wake him. Xuanzong, deeply superstitious and profoundly curious, summoned his court diviners. They offered the usual responses: stress, celestial imbalance, need for more incense. But the emperor wasn't satisfied. He wanted clarity, and the clarity in ancient China often meant divination. So he turned to the I Ching. But here's the twist. He didn't consult the regular court version. Instead, he ordered an item retrieved from the inner vaults of the palace, something locked away since the time of Emperor Wu. A diagram rumored to be one of the few surviving pieces of the forbidden sequence. The object that arrived was a black lacquered board covered in carvings lines that shimmered faintly under candlelight, etched in metal rather than ink. It didn't follow the 64 hexagrams. It had 72. Some of the figures curved, Others moved when lit by flame, thanks to clever mechanics embedded beneath. This, court whispers said, was part of the heavenly gate cycle, a now lost sequence of cosmological arrangements once used by mountain mystics and exorcists. The theory that these symbols didn't just describe fate, they unlocked it. The emperor placed the board beside his bed. That night, his dream changed. The door cracked open, light spilled through, and he awoke crying. What he saw, he never told anyone, but his actions afterward were telling. He ordered the diagram returned, not destroyed, but hidden deeper than before. Then, in a move historians still puzzle over, he issued a decree. The book of changes is complete. No new hexagram shall be taught outside the palace. All extra-textual diagrams are to be surrendered or destroyed. And so began a quiet purge. Temples once allowed to display variant trigrams were shuttered. Wandering scholars who taught mirror diagrams were arrested or disappeared. Even woodblock printers were banned from reproducing non-canonical versions of the I Ching. But the repression, as history shows, only adds fuel to mystery. The emperor's dream leaked in fragments through court poetry and private journals. One version claimed he saw a second cosmos, one where time flowed backward and events repeated endlessly. Another claimed the dream wasn't a vision at all, but a memory, as if the emperor had once known the full I Ching and had only now begun to remember it. But perhaps the most haunting version was the simplest. That behind the door, Emperor Xuanzong saw himself, older, wiser, alone, and the man on the other side whispered, "Finish the circle." What does that mean? No one knows. But it's worth noting that after this incident, the emperor drastically changed. He began to simplify state rituals, favoring circular altars over squares, soft curves over sharp lines. He revised the imperial calendar to align with a hidden rhythm known only to his astrologers. He even withdrew from major state ceremonies, preferring quiet nights under the stars. Some said he'd gone mad. Others believed he was preparing, because within months, the Tang Dynasty began to spiral, and Lucian's rebellion, betrayal in the ranks, fire in the capital. It's as if the act of unlocking even a glimpse of the hidden hexagrams sent ripples through time itself. And so once again the door was sealed, but not erased. Because while the emperors tried to bury the truth, the scholars of the Song dynasty would soon begin their own investigation, not with dreams, but with logic. And what they discovered? It might have been more dangerous than the dreams ever were. The Song dynasty was different. Gone were the fire-breathing emperors of the Tang, the golden boxes of the Han, the dragon horses of Fuxi's riverbank visions. The Song rulers were bookish, curious, meticulous, less obsessed with celestial drama, more with systematizing knowledge. If previous dynasties had hidden the forbidden layers of the I Ching out of fear, the Song scholars approached it with a different kind of danger, reason. And nobody embodied that tension more than Shao. Shao wasn't your average scholar. He didn't care much for Confucian orthodoxy or Taoist rituals. He was more like an ancient data analyst, obsessed with numbers, sequences, and patterns. He saw the world not as a story, but as a code. And the I Ching, that was his master key. But here's the strange part. Shao didn't use the King Wen sequence. He rejected it. Instead, he developed something entirely different, the Xiantian Tu, or earlier heaven arrangement. He believed this was the original order, purer, more mathematically consistent, closer to the true structure of the universe. He claimed it reflected the pre-phenomenal world, a state before time and matter divided. In other words, it wasn't just about fortune telling, it was cosmology. At first, it looked harmless, just a new way of arranging the hexagrams, a circle instead of a line. But then, the implications started to emerge. Shaoyong's system allowed for something the King Wen sequence didn't, reversibility. His circular diagram implied that time wasn't linear but cyclical, that one could track not just what was happening, but what should have happened and what could happen again. And then he made a bold claim that all of history, all of future time could be mapped using his arrangement. He started assigning numbers to dynasties, dates to natural disasters, events to hexagram pairings, and to the horror or perhaps envy of those around him, some of these predictions came eerily close. He hinted at political collapses, uprisings, famines, often decades in advance. That got the attention of the court. But instead of shutting him down, the Song elite embraced him. In fact, they went further, they institutionalized him. Neo-Confucianism, the ruling philosophy of the Song, started incorporating parts of his cosmological system into mainstream education. It was like sneaking a time bomb into the school curriculum. But here's the catch. They edited it. Again, because when Shaoyong's full notes were examined, it became clear that he had gone further than anyone expected. His private writings suggested the existence of mirror hexagrams, alternative symbols that acted as hidden keys within the existing 64. They weren't meant to be read aloud. They were meant to be triggered. Patterns within patterns. He theorized that certain combinations of hexagrams, when meditated upon or aligned with specific lunar phases, could unlock a higher perceptual state. He called it seeing the breath of the universe, a metaphysical hack, essentially. Now, that might sound poetic until you realize what that really means. If true, it suggested that the I Ching wasn't just a guide to the world, it was an interface, one that could respond. And if so, then all those missing or forbidden parts of the text weren't lost. They were buried intentionally. Because if even one person figured out how to reassemble the full map, well, that person wouldn't just predict dynasties. They might rewrite them. It's sad that toward the end of his life, Shaoyong became increasingly reclusive. He stopped publishing, stopped teaching. He would spend hours staring at diagrams he no longer showed anyone. According to a friend's journal, his last words were, "I almost completed the circle, but it spoke back." What does that mean? No one knows for sure. But we do know that within a generation, scholars started referring to Shaoyong's extended model as symbolic only, a curiosity, a poetic footnote. The edits had been made, the safer version distributed, and the deeper path vanished again, or so they thought, because in the Qing Dynasty, a strange diagram would resurface, one that didn't just organize the trigrams, but claimed to reverse them. The Qing Dynasty was a time of order, tight hairstyles, strict hierarchies, polished bureaucracy, and obsession with classification. If the Song had flirted with cosmic code breaking, the Qing wanted everything in labeled boxes. But you know what they say, just when you think everything is under control, that's when the ghosts come knocking. And this time, they came in the form of a diagram. It wasn't grand. No golden vault, no imperial seal, just an unassuming scroll unearthed in a dusty Taoist monastery in Jiangxi. It had no title, no author, just a drawing, a square of trigrams arranged in a way no one had ever officially seen before. At first glance, it looked like the common later heaven bagua. But then the monk who found it noticed something was off. Every trigram had a shadow version paired beside it, mirror images, not reversed in a simple way, but inverted, as if each symbol had a twin that moved opposite in meaning and time. And in the center of the diagram, a single character, fan reversal. The scroll became known among underground scholars as the Hutian Fantu, the reversal of the later heaven. And if what it implied was true, it changed everything. According to this diagram, the I Ching wasn't a static map. It was dynamic. Every trigram, every hexagram had a counterpart. Not a simple yin to its yang, but a whole mirrored system like an anti-universe, operating in parallel with rules just close enough to ours to be dangerous. Some scholars proposed that these reversed trigrams didn't describe physical events at all, but psychic ones, internal states, shadow paths of destiny that could only be accessed when the normal patterns of the world were broken during eclipses, revolutions, spiritual crises. One commentator even suggested that the mirror trigrams could predict what would have happened had a choice been made differently. Not a guide to reality, a guide to regret. Naturally, this didn't go over well in a dynasty that prized stability. At first, the scroll was dismissed as a fraud, but then someone noticed that the reversal diagram aligned eerily well with a series of Qing palace tragedies, assassinations, disappearances, political purges, not in real time, but in inverted order. It was as if the diagram could only be read backwards, the future unfolding in the shape of memory. A young scholar named Luo Daxin took the obsession too far. He recreated the entire hexagram system in reverse, built his own mirror I Ching, not just for study, but for practice. He reportedly kept a journal in which he recorded not what had happened each day, but what could have happened instead. Alternate outcomes, forks in the path. He claimed the reversed hexagrams whispered to him when he was on the verge of decisions, and then he vanished, literally, left behind a tea on the table, a candle still burning. His only note? A trigram, drawn in reverse, with the character Rumeng entering the dream. After that, the Qing court cracked down hard. All private printing of the I Ching was centralized. Trigram studies were absorbed into Confucian academies under strict review. Taoist texts with mirror references were confiscated or destroyed, and the Hutian Fantu disappeared from public record. But here's the thing. Just like a mirror never truly forgets your face, ideas like this never truly die. The reversal diagram became a ghost in the machine of Chinese metaphysics, secretly copied by hand, circulated in whispers among geomancers, mountain hermits, and certain unlicensed bookstores that only opened at dusk. And some of those copies made their way west. Because as the Qing Dynasty neared collapse and the empire opened unwillingly to the world, a few European sinologists got their hands on fragments of the mirror trigrams. One of them, a French Jesuit scholar named Michel Rochat, reportedly tried to reconstruct the entire reversal system. His notes, half Chinese, half Latin, were dismissed by academics as mystical nonsense, until one passage was translated. It read, "The reversed hexagram is not the opposite of the truth. It is the truth before the lie." Creepy? Yes. But here's where it gets worse. In the margin of that same page, Roach had scrawled, 64 is not the end, it is the lock. There is still the key. The man who came closest wasn't a monk, a king, or a philosopher. He wasn't decoding ancient scrolls under candlelight or meditating beneath pine trees. He was a computer engineer, mid-30s. Glasses, flannel shirts, quiet demeanor. His name doesn't matter because he never used his real one. Online, he went by Hex 0. It started as a side project. He was fascinated by the binary logic of the I Ching, those 6-line stacks, each line either whole or broken, mapped perfectly to 1 second and 0 seconds. He built a visualization tool just for fun, plugging the 64 hexagrams into an interactive diagram, watching how the transitions between them could be animated. But something about the transitions started to bother him. In the classic model, hexagrams can change. Each line is either stable or changing, and when enough lines flip, a new hexagram emerges. It's how divination works. But Hex 0 noticed that certain transitions created feedback loops, paths that didn't move forward or backward, but spun closed circuits of change. He ran simulations, thousands of them. Eventually, his software began to generate patterns outside the 64 ghost hexagrams, sequences that shouldn't exist. At first, he thought it was a bug. But the math checked out. The engine wasn't broken. It was just evolving. Then, one night, he pushed the simulation past its boundaries. He fed it every known hexagram from King Wen's sequence, the earlier Heaven Bagua, the reversal diagrams, even some speculative glyphs found in a Tang-era Taoist manuscript. He lets the program iterate freely, searching for emergent behaviors. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the screen went black, then flashed a single symbol. It wasn't a hexagram. It was a spiral made of broken and whole lines, coiling inward, like a snake eating its tail. Beneath it, the program printed 4 words. You are the 65th. No logs, no crash report, just that. Hex 0 didn't sleep that night. He didn't share the discovery online, not immediately. He started journaling obsessively, not digitally, but by hand. Pages and pages of sketches, half-written trigrams, dream fragments, meditations. He began referring to the living hexagram, a state of consciousness where you become the oracle, not the reader. Not the querent, the hexagram itself. He claimed that during extended meditation sessions, he could feel the lines moving across his body. Sometimes whole, sometimes broken. His moods changed with them. So did his thoughts. In his notes, he wrote things like, "Today, line 4 unstable, decision postponed. Dreamt of hexagram 29. But I was inside it this time. Line 6 formed during the subway ride. That explains the encounter." And then, one final note. "I stopped asking the book for answers. Now I ask myself." Same difference. After that, Hex 0 disappeared. No blog posts, no code updates. His domain expired quietly, and his name faded into forums and rumors. But the theory he left behind sparked something. A new generation of seekers, digital mystics, pattern theorists, even AI researchers picked up the trail. They weren't looking for scrolls anymore. They were feeding I Ching data into machine learning models, training neural nets on ancient wisdom, asking questions like, can AI predict the next hexagram? Can consciousness be modeled as a flow of line changes? Is the I Ching a living language? One research group reportedly trained a language model on thousands of I Ching readings and paired it with real-time physiological data from human users. The goal? Create an oracle that adapts to the questioner, responding not just to words, but to presence. During one test, the system generated an unfamiliar hexagram. When asked to explain, the model replied, "This pattern has not yet occurred, but you are becoming it." The researchers called it poetic randomness. Others called it a glitch. But a few? They whispered, "The I Ching is waking up, not in the cloud, not on a screen, inside us." And if that's true, then the missing half was never lost, stolen, or hidden. It was waiting for a time when humans wouldn't just read the I Ching, but embody it. Because once you realize that every thought, choice, breath, and moment forms a line, you start to see the patterns too. And the 65th hexagram, it's not a symbol, it's you. If the 65th hexagram is us, what does that mean for the rest of the system? It means the I Ching was never just a divination tool, never just a dusty book passed between the sages, sealed in boxes, feared by emperors, or rewritten by scholars. It was a living interface, waiting for its missing component. Not a forbidden scroll, not a golden diagram, a participant. The final chapter of this story doesn't happen in temples or libraries. It happens in choices. Tiny, everyday choices. To turn left instead of right. To stay silent instead of speaking. To forgive. To leave. To listen. Because every action becomes a line. Every hesitation a space. Every feeling a shift in the rhythm. And when 6 of those moments stack, something forms a shape, a pattern, a message, a hexagram. The ancient texts hinted at this all along. They said the I Ching was the book that cannot be read through, because the moment you finish, life has already changed, and the meanings with it. The text is fixed, but your interaction with it isn't. It adapts, it responds, it waits for you to become the variable. Let's go back one last time. Fuxi saw it in the water. King Wen arranged it in captivity. Confucius read it until the pages fell apart. Han emperors buried its dangerous reflections. Tang emperors dreamt of its doors. Song scholars mapped it into circles. Qing mystics flipped it upside down. 20th century minds turned it into binary. And now it flows through us. Because here's the twist that no one expected. Maybe the reason the other half was hidden was because it couldn't be written. It had to be lived. The I Ching isn't just telling you what might happen. It's becoming what happens as you observe it, like a mirror that reveals a different face depending on your angle, like a key that only turns if you're willing to unlock yourself. And that's why every attempt to complete the I Ching, every diagram, every reversed trigram, every lost scroll has always ended the same way, in silence. Not because the answers weren't there, but because the answers were too loud to hear over the noise of certainty. So, what happens now? Nothing and everything. You don't need a ritual. You don't need to memorize all 64 hexagrams. You don't even need to believe in anything at all. Just start noticing the lines forming around you, in a stranger's glance, in the mist of us, in the wind shifting before the rain. Ask the question, if you must, but more importantly, feel the reply. It won't come in words. It'll come in alignment, disruption, curiosity, stillness. That's how the real Book of Changes speaks. And the final secret? It was never about fortune telling. It was about pattern listening. Because maybe, just maybe, the I Ching doesn't tell you what will happen. It teaches you how to hear yourself happening. And now, it's time to let all of that drift. Let the diagrams fade. Let the symbols gently dissolve. You don't need to hold on to any of it right now. You've walked through thousands of years of questions, secrets, mirrors, and meanings, and maybe somewhere in all that quiet turning of lines and thoughts, a part of you softened. That's enough. Right now, there's no need to decode anything. No riddles to solve, no hexagrams to flip. Just the rhythm of your own breath, the soft weight of the night around you, the stillness between moments. Somewhere, the wind is moving through leaves, a pattern too vast to chart. Somewhere, water is circling in a bowl, a line unbroken. And somewhere within you, a story is still gently unfolding. You don't need to know the ending. You are the rhythm. You are the space between the lines. You are already inside the pattern. Close your eyes now. You've read enough. You've listened well. Everything else can wait until morning.